Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2012 to 2016 series Catwoman, part of DC's The New 52. I can't imagine that Catwoman, or Selina Kyle, is a character I actually need to introduce to anyone, but let me give some context anyway. The character actually first appeared in the first issue of Batman's first self-titled series. There, she was referred to simply as the Cat and disguised her jewel heisting ways by dressing up as an old lady. Batman figured out who she was, I kid you not, by noticing how nice the old lady's legs were. Yeah, quiet or Papa Spank. That's legitimately something Batman once said. Yikes. He also let her go at the end of the issue because he found her attractive, even tripping up Robin to make sure she had the chance to get away. So Catwoman would continue on, remaining popular enough to have multiple long-running solo titles and even being among the 52 titles released at the company-wide reboot of the entire DC universe that was the New 52. Which brings us to today's topic, so let's get to it and take this away. The comic opens with some boobies. Wow, really? That's our first look at our main character, just her boobs? Well, you can really see where this comic's priorities lie already. Okay, maybe that was just intended to be an action shot. What's the next panel? Oh, more boobies. Gotcha. Come on, let's see our main character already. Oh, now we have T and A. Nice. I'm sensing a pattern here. In fact, it's not until page 3 that we actually finally get to see Catwoman's face, and even then, it's still partially obscured and not without a good helping of boobs. The comic, or really I should probably say DC, wanted to make it clear to everyone right from the beginning that this comic was being made for one reason and one reason alone: sex appeal. Titillation. So, the entire first issue, we basically learn nothing about Catwoman herself other than that she has boobs and we'll be seeing them a lot. And even once she's finally dressed and we get a look at her face, in the first of many crazy faces artist March likes to draw her with, it doesn't end. It continues to be a theme throughout the issue, even ending with her and Batman doing the wild thing by the end of the issue. Oh yeah, glad to see we've come so far. Also, that's not really a position that you're getting much done in. That's just a position that emphasizes her curves for the viewers at home. And the sexualization continues into the next issue with the Batcat Night of Fun continuing there. Man, they are really overemphasizing her lips. It kind of looks more like he's having sex with a Joker than it does Catwoman. And it's not like this is indication of a relationship. Though Batman does show up sporadically throughout the series, the two are back to primarily being at odds, despite having grown kinda close before the New 52 reboot. So this is just the most casual of casual sex, emphasized by Selina's own narration that most of the costumes stay on. If you're still somehow doubting their focus for this comic, just take a look at the cover to issue 1, which they reuse as the cover of the first collected edition. It practically screams, "Hey dudes, read this book, it's got boobies." Just compare it to this alternate take on the same cover done as a variant cover for the final issue of the series. Still sexy, less sexualized. Just something to think about. But I've already gone on about that for way too long, because honestly, Judd Winnick's and Guillaume March's run on the series is really not that bad. The plot here starts before the series does, with Catwoman having stolen from this yellow bastard-looking wannabe mob boss. He takes revenge by killing her fence and best friend, Lola, before having his men work Catwoman over. But Catwoman gets away from his men and comes back at him to beat the ever-living shit out of him. I'm telling you, this Catwoman is full of crazy. Blaming herself for Lola's death, Cat decides to work solo from here on out, leading her to take a job on some bad intel and steal this bag of money. The bag, which was supposed to be an easy job, was suspicious right off the bat when it turns out the money drop was being protected by a metahuman named Reach, who nearly kills Selina when she sends her flying up into the friggin' atmosphere. Catwoman does manage to save herself and take Reach out, but before long it becomes clear that the money was dirty cop money and they want it back. So a massive citywide manhunt for her begins, and when the cops manage to catch her, they immediately pretend to lose her. This allows them to sneak her into an interrogation room where they have Reach work her over so she will reveal the location of the money. That doesn't turn out quite as planned though, especially when Selina bites Reach's freaking ear off. Like I said, full of damn crazy. She's rescued by hunky man meat and good guy cop Detective Alvarez, who has been trying to bust her for all the right reasons, but decides he can't let her death be on his conscience, and so lets her go. Realizing the solo thing isn't quite working out, Selina goes to Gwen Altamont, an old friend that Selina reconnected with at Lola's funeral, who is offering her services as a new fence for Selina. For a time, Selina works with Gwen and a new metahuman named Spark to pull off some heists. But the primary plot gets interrupted first by a Night of the Owls tie-in, where Selina is unexpectedly saving the Penguin's life, and the appearance on the streets of a serial killer who is kidnapping hookers. Catwoman tries to get help from Spark and Detective Alvarez in investigating this, as her own history as a street kid makes her extra sympathetic, but eventually finds herself needing to go all the way to Batman. The killer turns out to be someone named Dollhouse, who claims to be the daughter of Dollmaker, that guy who cut off the Joker's face in Detective Comics #1, and true to her name, has been filling a warehouse full of rooms of bodies of the missing street people turned into life-size dolls. Despite his help against the Owls and Dollhouse, Gwen never takes to trusting Spark, and eventually she uncovers that he's really working for the police, just trying to get close to Catwoman to learn where the stolen money is. He says there's more to it than that, but he never gets the chance to explain because Gwen simply shoots him dead. It seems like it was meant to be a cliffhanger, but Winnick's run on the title ends right here, and Ann Nocenti takes over, and she apparently decides to just leave Spark dead. She does, however, continue to use Gwen and Alvarez as background characters. Gwen, though, who has handled herself so far like ex-military, quickly becomes a frightened little mouse under some threats from the Penguin. Alvarez remains mostly the same, but he also gets a gung-ho, violent partner in Detective Tammy Keys, who he's constantly arguing with. At this point, Catwoman also begins taking jobs from this guy named Trip Winter, but he only seems to have bad jobs to feed her, and he is pretty much forgotten almost instantly. The plot, such as it is, sees Catwoman suddenly finding herself in the middle of a gang war between Penguin and the Rat Tails, a gang of kids with rat tail haircuts led by a guy, get this, named Rat Tail. Yeah, this part of the comic is clearly top shelf. The war escalates to the point that Penguin starts literally bombing the equally uncreatively named Badlands, the area of Gotham the Rat Tails and Selina apparently call home. A bomb opens the ground beneath King Rat Tail, dropping him down into what's called the Gotham Underground. Catwoman tries to save him as he falls, but instead only pulls up this cat out of that giant hole. I'm not sure how that's even physically possible. Was the cat just floating there just below the ground or something? What the hell? So Catwoman goes into the underground to rescue him, which she's able to do because she found an entrance to it beneath Arkham Asylum, when she escaped from it earlier, which itself was after she'd been brought there by the Justice League, which they did as a fake out to try to get Catwoman into a group called the Secret Society as a mole, a plot point that comes out of nowhere and goes nowhere and is never mentioned again. Top shelf, I'm telling ya. Gotham Underground is divided into 3 sections: a quarantine bunker run by survivalist types trying to escape a possible future plague that's supposed to wipe out humanity, a section named Charneltown run by this guy made of fire who calls himself Dr. Phosphorus and his daughter Tinderbox, and the Nethers, an old section of Gotham that was flooded to create Gotham Reservoir. But the residents there found a way to hide away from the waters and continue their own society down below. This group is led by the New 52 version of Duella Dent, who originally was Two-Face's daughter, but pretended to be the daughter of a number of famous Bat villains. Here, they sever her ties to Harvey Dent, despite keeping the name, and revive her Joker's daughter personality. The story is she found the Joker's face floating in the waters of the Nethers and decided to put it on her own face and become the Joker's daughter. I feel like the Joker's daughter has some serious potential as sort of an off-brand Harley Quinn, but she's pretty wasted in this series and doesn't really do anything of note. Phosphorus had a plan to use these diamonds that had a flaw in them that made them into bombs to burn all of Gotham so he could live on the surface. Catwoman instead uses them to burn Charneltown, burying Phosphorus and returns to the surface with Rat Tail. Nocenti's final arc involves a mixed plot between a supposed thief race that has various thieves competing in an actual race and in an attempt to steal from an old mansion. We also mix in here a plot involving the previous owners of that mansion and a 100-year-old murder mystery. Really though, the most notable thing about this part of the series is how bad it is. Nocenti's writing is just so all over the place. It jumps so much from idea to idea constantly with no explanation of how it got from one thing to another or any kind of logic behind it. Like in one of her first adventures here, where she's hired to steal a diamond, which is being kept in the headquarters of a secret government agency called Argus. Not that any of that is really explained to us, I pieced it together from reading the comic a few times. Instead, what we see is the following sequence. Catwoman meets with Trip Winters. They kiss for no apparent reason, and despite there having been no evidence of romantic interest between them before. Then there's a weird black oil tentacle thing that for some reason they call a map. Trip proceeds to tell her it's for a heist. Then we just immediately cut into Argus headquarters, though it doesn't yet tell us that's where we are, and we see Catwoman in disguise as a scientist to gain access to something. Then we cut to her asking, what's this pattern, about an apparently blank wall, to what was an empty room literally one panel earlier. But now this guy Darwin is suddenly there and answering like it's a normal question. And neither of them act like it's weird that the other person is there. Cut to Catwoman pulling out the oil tentacle map thing, and Darwin acting like it's a totally normal thing. Catwoman throws off her scientist disguise, and Darwin acts like it's a totally normal thing. Then suddenly they're through the previously blank wall into a room filled with mystical artifacts. Darwin is suddenly helping Catwoman with no explanation as to why. And this sequence, in particular, is extra messy. It's a little hard to tell from their conversation, but they're talking about items in the room. A skilled writer-artist group would probably be emphasizing the items in smaller panels to draw focus to what they're talking about, instead of just this massive amount of text bubbles that just seem to wander about a conversation with no context or reasoning. And the storyline just gets weirder from there, with them unleashing a weird bat demon thing somehow, and Catwoman growing elf ears for no apparent reason, and eventually ending with her driving a tank through a wall. Just because. And the storytelling never gets more lucid, like how during the much later tie-in with Gothopia, where everyone in Gotham is basically drugged into thinking they're living a more perfect life, Selina starts a job at a suicide helpline since that's the only crime still happening. Even though in other comics that have this tie-in, everyone kind of forgets the events of Gothopia when it's over, Selina for some reason keeps her job on the suicide line, using it to reconnect her with Gwen, and even somehow using it to give her a position where she has access to the morgue and can meet with a detective about the 100-year-old murder case I mentioned earlier. Which makes no sense to me whatsoever, but okay. It isn't even clear at what point she stops being affected by the Gothopia delusion, and this despite the fact that she seems to temporarily recover after having a Selina Kyle Catwoman fight. It's like a lady version of the Superman 3 fight. I might forgive Nocenti's run a little if it at least took focus off of sexualizing Catwoman, but it doesn't. It just gets weirder. There is one good thing to come out of Nocenti's run though, and that's the character of Alice Tesla. Though she's introduced completely at random in line with everything that happens during this part of the comic, I like the idea of her. She's a tech genius with a steampunk fashion sense who never goes outside. She becomes Catwoman's gadget designer and general backup expert in all fields. And honestly, I find myself wishing I was reading a comic about her instead. Like, seriously, please DC, keep using this character. Give her her own comic even. I'd read it. She's actually the only character other than Catwoman that actually does get used for the rest of the series, getting a brief mention during Genevieve Valentine's run, who takes over next, and being the only side character of Frank Thierry's run on the final volume. Which brings us up to those volumes. Nocenti's run finally ends with the coming of the Batman Eternal Maxi series, written by New 52 Batman scribe Scott Snyder. This series moved the Bat Family titles 1 year into the future, and saw Selina Kyle become the head of the Calabrese crime family. Because as it turns out, she's been the missing daughter of family head Rex Calabrese this whole time. I love how Valentine's run on this series basically starts with a declaration of how different the comic is going to be. Compare the introduction of Selina here to her introduction in the first issue. It takes only 2 panels here for us to see her face, and those bare 2 pages tell us more about what's going on in her life than the entire first issue of Winnick's run. We see that she has traded her cat suit for a business suit, we see that she is now working with other people instead of alone, and we see that she is fighting crime, albeit for what seems to be a personal reason. And that's just in 2 pages. The entire run here is a pretty fascinating and unique take on Catwoman. We see Selina excel at being a different kind of mob boss, taking on the whole world, both those who commit crime and those who fight it, attempting to forge a better world out of it. Her attempts bring her into conflict with Black Mask, who is trying to make a name for himself, the Penguin, who she makes an uneasy alliance with, and a family who owns the ports named Hasegawa. I love how the Hasegawa's home base just seems to be a ninja training camp. Like, something out of American Ninja or something. You guys all remember American Ninja, right? No one? Okay then. The Hasegawa family is led by this guy, Tatsuo Hasegawa, but we focus more on his daughter, Eiko, who also dreams of a better future for the gangs, in which she discovers that Selina was Catwoman, and that she has given up being Catwoman to be the head of the Calabrese family. She takes it upon herself to become the new Catwoman in her place. The two women even start a tentative love affair, and I have to say, it's a little odd to see Selina Kyle kissing Catwoman. It's like she's kissing herself from outside of her own body. It's like a Yuri version of the Superman 3 fight. But Selina's spirit for the fight is grievously injured on multiple occasions. First, when she is forced to kill her cousin, after he is exposed as a leak, and second at the revelation of Batman's death, which occurred in New 52 Batman number 40. I love how this comic depicts Selina's reaction to the news, first acting like she doesn't care while there's an audience, and then as she moves into the dark, it hits her harder, until she finally collapses into her current lover's arms. And man, the art for this part of the series is so good. It's so noir and fits the mood so perfectly. Eiko is also deeply wounded by the fight when Black Mask sees her return home in her Catwoman outfit. Since he mistakenly believes Selina is Catwoman, he thinks Hasegawa is a traitor who's dealing with Selina. Though Tatsuo realizes the truth, he keeps silent to protect his daughter when Black Mask comes for revenge. Eiko takes her own revenge when she decides to poison the heads of a large number of small-time crime bosses, while her men go out and attack their gangs in person. At this point, Selina decides she wants out and leaves the family to her cousin, bringing Valentine's enjoyable take on the series to an all-too-early end. Which does still leave one more volume, that sees Frank Thierry put Selina through a fairly generic heist film plotline. She takes the job from her Vince, a guy whose existence seems to contradict all the past information in this series we've received about Lola and Gwen, but whatever. I guess it doesn't really matter because he immediately gets murdered for his involvement, and Catwoman gets blamed for his death. The plot ends up bringing in a massive amount of Batman family members and villains, including Batgirl, Killer Croc, Penguin, and even Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, showing up to break their gal pal out of prison at one point. The story ends with some backstory on Catwoman and Black Mask, and some fun Gotham history surrounding a secret society called the False Face Society. The ending to this story is extremely sudden, but I guess it had to be because it was time for the DC Rebirth. And here, it's time for the breakdown. The New 52 was the perfect opportunity for DC to go out on a limb and try new things with their characters. So, of course they didn't. Instead, they took a very back-to-basics approach, practically shouting from the rooftops their opinions of what these characters were good for. The one truly unique story we get here is during Valentine's run. This portion of the series is unique enough and well-written enough and stylish enough that honestly I'd highly recommend getting just those 2 volumes and ignoring everything else. Especially seeing as they don't really connect to anything before or after directly enough for those volumes to matter. And whatever my problems with Winnick or Thierry, their runs are honestly perfectly fine. They had interesting enough characters, they had a goal and a vision, their stories were interesting enough, and their writing, if nothing else, was at least lucid. None of which is true about Nocenti's run, which is just so all over the place, and unfocused, and bizarre, that all I get out of it is the feeling that I'm slowly going insane. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of medium. Just ignore Nocenti's run altogether and you'll be left with a comic that manages to be perfectly competent and even, occasionally, kind of good. The collected editions get 2 shiny diamonds, 3 crazy faces, and 3 soggy Joker faces. That breaks down like this. Yeah, 8 volumes. That's why this video is so damn long. Volumes 6 and 7 are obviously the superior collections here, not only having the best story, but also having a fair amount of bonus content with alternate covers and a small amount of bonus art. Volumes 1 and 2 have only a few bonus covers and Volume 8 only has 1, but I'd still hold those 3 over Nocenti's run on Volumes 3, 4, and 5, which are all pretty lacking in bonuses anyway. They are probably the longest collections, but I'll let you decide whether having more of something so bad is a good thing or not. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to click the subscribe button to be here for future videos. Be sure to join the conversation by commenting below. And let me know what you thought about this comic, or what you thought about my opinions on it. Then make sure to stick around for next week and the next video. Hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.